Hey, dude. Can you tell me if I got this backflip, if you think I got it? Because I don't know. I'm almost there, but just tell me what you think. Can I do it? Yes, for sure. Go for it. You totally got it. No problem. Okay. Got this. Fear. That annoying barrier that keeps us from doing the flips we want. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just turn it off altogether? Well, maybe not. Maybe fear is actually a good thing. Let's talk about it. So where does fear come from? Well, it's pretty simple, really. Fear is just your brain trying to keep you from looking like this. Let's break it down. First, I'm going to go over where fear comes from. Second, I'm going to go over how we can overcome it. And third, I'm going to go over some common mistakes I see when people try to overcome that fear barrier and some tips and tricks on how to do it as well. When people get a mental block, usually it's because of the fear of getting hurt. And that makes sense. So to overcome it, we need to convince our brain that we are not going to get hurt. The first step to doing that is to accept that fear is your friend. It's just trying to protect you, and learn to work with it rather than just shoving it down deep inside with all the other emotions you don't want to think about. So how do we do that? Well, fortunately for you, one of the easiest and most effective ways to overcome fear is through the power of visualization. This is more than just imagining yourself doing a flip. It involves experiencing each specific part of the trick you're trying to do. Say I was stuck on going over my head in a backflip, a very common mental block. The first thing I would do is learn what a really good backflip looks like, and there are plenty of videos online for that. Then I would break it down into its most basic parts: the jump, the set, the tuck, and the landing. Then I would go through in my mind and imagine what each of those parts would feel like, what my muscles have to do, where I'm going to be in the air, how fast I need to do it, things like that. Visualization is a powerful tool to use when learning flips because to your brain, it's almost the same as if you're actually doing it. However, in order to really be able to feel what the motions are when you're visualizing, you first need to know what they feel like in real life. And that's where drills and progressions come in. A drill is just an exercise to practice one specific part of a trick. So let's go back to the backflip example. The jumping part is easy. You just want to practice keeping your chest up and then throwing your arms all the way up. For the set, it gets a little bit more complicated. This is where having a trampoline so you could practice jumping and waiting and then landing on your back, or jumping onto a block in a gym would be helpful. I will always recommend that people start in a gym just because it's safer, but there's still plenty of ways to learn it outside if you don't have access to a gym. The tuck part is really just a backwards roll in the air, so practicing backward rolls on the ground is helpful, and you can also practice backward rolling off blocks. For the landing of a backflip, the biggest part to drill is spotting and opening up. And the easiest way to practice that is doing backflips on a trampoline so you can get the timing down. Doing high backflips, doing low backflips. And for the actual landing on the ground part, you can just practice jumping off things. Progressions are very similar in that the skill is broken down into the easiest possible step and then slowly built up and added upon until you get to your final trick. So some progressions for a backflip would be starting with a handstand, and then a backwards roll, then a macaco, then a back handspring, and then working on backflips and doing backflips into a pit. Then you would do backflips on a trampoline, and then onto a mat or onto something soft, and then finally on the floor, or anywhere, on a bunch of spikes if you want to. Excellent! So now that you know what your skill looks like, and you have practiced each part so you know what it feels like, and you can visualize it and break it down in your mind, now it's time to put it all together. What's the worst that could happen? Actually, What is the worst that could happen? In order to feel really comfortable attempting new tricks, you need to know how the skill can go wrong and how to bail out of it if needed. Bailing out of a trick should be a last resort because it's much safer to land the trick than it is to bail out of it. Something I always tell people when they're learning a trick for the first time is don't go for it unless you know you're going to send it. And this just helps reduce the chance of getting lost and losing control mid-flip. With that said, practicing bails is actually really fun. The goal is to simulate an uncontrolled movement and then practice recovering from it. This usually involves dive rolling out of the movement. And again, this is best practiced in a gym on a spring floor or onto a mat, but it can still be practiced if you find a nice soft patch of grass. Once you know how to bail out of a movement properly, then it's going to be much less scary to send it because you know you're going to be able to save yourself if needed. The last step of overcoming fear is the most important, but it's also the most frustrating, and that is just practicing and being patient. Although a large amount of practice when doing flips like Thanos is inevitable, there are still things that you can do to make your practice time more efficient and more effective. You can use visualization to practice your tricks before you do them and think about what corrections need to be made. That way you're not just throwing the same exact skill over and over again with no improvement. You can also record yourself doing a trick and then analyze the footage after to understand the difference between what a trick feels like versus what it actually looks like. This reflection allows you to make necessary corrections to your technique. It can be helpful to film both the actual skill and the drills to make sure you're doing them correctly. Lastly, practice in different environments. Mix up where you practice the skill and train some different variations of the skill to really get the most out of each practice session. Congratulations! You've almost made it to the end of the video, but before you start training again, here are a couple tips and tricks as well as some common mistakes I see when people are training. Mistake number 1 is moving too quickly. Just like you don't want to rush town hall levels in Clash of Clans, you also don't want to rush your tricks too quickly. If you've been making a ton of progress on your tricks and then suddenly hit a roadblock and you just can't get over it, it could be because you just moved too quickly and didn't spend enough time on the progressions. It can be helpful to go back to basics, start at the simplest version of what you're doing, and then work your way up again. Mistake number 2 is using the send it mentality for everything. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good send, but unless you've done the skill before or have practiced drills enough that you know you can do it with good form, using the send mentality for everything can hurt more than it helps. It's usually best to work on the progressions that you know you can do safely and then slowly change those into higher and higher level skills. Training with friends and a group can be hugely helpful in overcoming mental blocks. Just don't let them pressure you into doing a trick that you know you're not ready for. Mistake number 3 is training only one trick constantly. Practice on your desired trick is obviously very important. But if it's the only thing you train, then you can get stuck in certain patterns. And that can keep you from progressing forward. So if you step away from the skill for a few days, you may find that many of the blocks have disappeared when you return. Sometimes pausing your efforts and coming back with a fresh perspective can lead to significant gains. And even if you're taking a break from a skill, you can still train it by training skills around it. So, going back to the backflip example, if I got stuck and I wanted a break from backflips for a little bit, I could train other flips like side flips or cheat gainer or other variations of going backwards like back handsprings and backwards rolls. Everyone is on their own journey when learning new tricks, and I would love to know what tricks that you are working on, so let me know in the comments down below. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe as it does help me out. I'll see you on the flip side.